Hi, cheese friends. Today's cheese really doesn't need an introduction. She is beauty, she is grace, and she has most definitely been sitting at the popular girls' table for the last 30 years. Introducing, or should I actually say reintroducing, Humboldt Fog. So, whether you're new here or if you've been listening since Jasper Hill's cloth bound cheddar, cough, cough, go back and listen to my first episode. Welcome to Curd is the Word. I'm your host, Brittany, and this is the most delicious podcast where I break down fancy cheese for not so fancy people. If you're checking this out on YouTube, you can already see just how aesthetically beautiful this cheese is. She's stunning. Also, don't mind the wedge piece. I tried to film this yesterday a lot of times, and I hated them all. So I completely rewrote my script, and here we are. If you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts, I'm going to try my best to be as descriptive as possible. We will start describing this cheese. She's got a bloomy rind, and yes, that's the same type of rind that you'll find on bries, camemberts, other soft ripened cheeses. We also have a contrasting vegetable ash line cutting down the middle. And we also have what the Academy of Cheese would consider a dual textured cheese. This means that we have two different textures in the paste. Around the edge, you will find, maybe let's just hold this cheese up for the whole time. Around the edge, you will find there is a gooey cream line, and then the inside core is a little bit more classic goat cheese. It's chalky, it's dense, it's crumbly. In terms of flavor, which we will get to in a bit, same thing. You're getting more of that goat cheese flavor in the middle. Oh, and by the way, there really is an Academy of Cheese. Again, another humble brag. Feel free to listen to my podcast episode on my review of the Academy of Cheese, as I did complete level 1. So, I have a quick confession to make about Humboldt Fog. It took me years to remember whether or not this cheese was made with cow's milk or goat's milk. I've had this cheese probably for the last 10 years or so, and sometimes it's really, really smooth when it's younger, and when it gets older and more ripe is when you get more of those complex goat cheese nuances. But the texture of it is what always kind of threw me off, because it's a little unheard of to have a gooey goat cheese, right? Usually that's always cow's milk. But since this cheese literally changed the entire trajectory of goat cheese, I think it's safe to kind of call it the GOAT, like Drake would say, the greatest of all time. So that is my easy way of remembering this. Okay, so kind of tough to go from calling this cheese the greatest of all time to then say I don't really play favorites when it comes to cheeses. I do keep a running list of like my top 3 cheeses at any given moment, as I definitely get asked from time to time. However, please note, if I told you what my top 3 cheeses were last week, they probably have already changed. They definitely can probably change by the day. But what I truly admire so much about this cheese is that to the naked eye, untrained eye, green cheese eye, this looks like a fancy piece of cheese that would just came straight from France. It doesn't look like your typical American cheese. I know American cheese gets a bad rap. That's a whole nother topic for another day. But you take one bite of this cheese, and it feels approachable. It feels familiar. It's almost like a yin and yang of cheese. You've got smooth and crumbly. You've got fudgy kind of dairy consistency along with your bright and tangy goat cheese. It's refined yet approachable. And last but not least, the most important, it's literally the definition of American artisanal craft cheese mixed with old school European cheese making. I guess I could go on, but I'll stop there. You can catch my drift. Similar to my last episode on Also Arati, this cheese is so widely available. ShopRite has it. I got mine from my local Kings. I've seen it at Whole Foods. You can also order it from a number of cheese shops online. I did a quick Google search for you. Again, what is the name Humboldt Fog really telling us other than the place it was made? So let's get into this. And this episode is perfect timing because after we talk about the history and the story behind this cheese, I'm going to talk about a few beverage and food pairings that will carry you from Thanksgiving all the way through to New Year's. For those of you who don't know, myself included, because I feel like I learned so much when researching this cheese, I also had the chance to speak with Cypress Grove, which is such a it always feels really cool when I email the cheesemaker, like, hey, I've got these questions. I want to put your cheese on my podcast. And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. See attached. Just like that. So cool. There's always so much information to learn. Um, but the story behind Humboldt Fog goes the founder of Cypress Grove, Mary Keene, was literally a pioneer for the great American artisanal cheese boom in the 70s and 80s. Cypress Grove was founded in the 80s. And while Humboldt Fog was initially developed in 1992, Mary's story about how she started making cheese is fascinating. As a single mom to 4 kids, she wanted her children to only eat and drink the best, which I can completely empathize with. I swear my kid eats more home-cooked meals than I do. But she noticed that her neighbor had some goats to handle some brush control, and she asked about purchasing the goats for the milk. And her neighbor said, honey, if you can catch him, you can have him. And as a mom, I feel like that's literally, who doesn't love a challenge? So fast forward, we have 2 goats, Esmeralda and Hazel. And Mary decided, I guess it's time to learn how to make some cheese. So she went to where else? The epicenter of cheese, over to France. Learned how to make cheese from all the great cheesemakers. And on the flight home, she was with her pal, Judy Shad, who is actually the founder of Capriole Goat Cheese over in Indiana. Another just knock it out of the park company cheesemaker that makes some absolutely outstanding goat cheeses. We will definitely be diving into some on this show as well. On the flight home, she had a dream where she saw a goat cheese, soft ripened, with a line of vegetable ash down the center. And for those of you who are like, oh, that's because she just came from France and she learned how to make Morbier, you're probably correct. Morbier is a French-style cow's milk cheese that is notorious for the ash line running down the center. But Mary didn't let her dreams just, fizzle away, as a lot of us do. She went back to her Cypress Grove, and from there, Humboldt Fog was born. Some may say that the ash line of the cheese is reminiscent of the fog that rolls in off the coast there on the Pacific coast over in Arcata, California. And every morning, this area has a fog that rolls in, is located in Humboldt County. Let's put 2 and 2 together, and you have yourself Humboldt Fog. I feel like, not to toot my own horn, but to actually learn what the name means and then going and seeing it at your Whole Foods or cheese shop, it just really kind of, for me especially, clicks. Humboldt Fog. You're getting a cheese that is poetic, geographical, and as we've discussed before, the terroir is not just limited to Europe. We're definitely getting the coastal freshness of the air, whatever is on coating the grass out of the feed that the goats are eating, and we are getting a bite of that. So instead of getting a bite of the Pyrenees Mountains, we are getting a bite of the central coast of California, which pretty cool. This can happen in a domestic space, no problem. That also might be why it's won 2024 Super Gold at the World Cheese Awards, Best of California at the State Fair, and countless first, second, and third place at the American Cheese Society Awards since its initial inception. This is a truly, truly American classic, iconic cheese. All right, I'm definitely drooling over this cheese, if you can't already hear that in my voice. And I think that is a sufficient education on the history of Humboldt Fog. If you would like to know more, Cypress Grove was incredibly kind enough to respond to my emails, so I'm sure feel free to ask them any questions you might have. You can also ask me. I will find out for you. So let's dig in here. By the way, I'm using a Bosca knife. This is a specific soft cheese knife. If you notice, it has an incredibly thin blade. The thicker the blade, the more drag you actually create in cutting the cheese. So kind of like swimming, if you were like Some swimmers add drag by like wearing more swim layers and things like that. So we want less drag here. But as you cut a piece, I think it's important to note that you get yourself a piece that includes all the aspects that make this cheese so special. We have the rind. It is edible, as I'm dropping pieces all over. The rind is edible. You have the cream line, you have the crumbly core, and you have the vegetal ash line. I will say some people insist that they can taste the ash. It's up for discussion. I don't think it tastes like much. I think it's mainly for aesthetic purposes only, but you taste what you want to taste. Wow. You know, eating this, I was embarrassed that I admitted to you that I couldn't remember if this was cow or goat milk. Right off the bat, you are getting that tangy, zippy goat cheese flavor, but then that ooey gooey cream line kind of just smooths everything right out. It is divine. Wow. It's giving a clean, like, aftertaste, not tart, not like I always joke to some people, after you eat some blue cheese crumbles or goat cheese crumbles, you're kind of like the roof of your mouth because that flavor just stays behind. It's giving notes of buttermilk, fresh cream, slightly herbal flair, not too much, classically acidic, grassy. And just because you've hopefully watched last week's episode, you know that it is best to leave your cheese out for a little bit before you taste it. It helps the flavor molecules kind of spread out a bit, and which gives you a lot more flavor than if you just took it out of the fridge and just popped it right in. But there's really no wrong way to eat cheese. Let's be real here. I'm going to take another piece so we can, catch some aroma, see what's happening here. It's not overly funky, it's not overly pungent, but yeah, same kind of super super high dairy cream smells to it. I love it. It's really a smooth, easygoing, beautiful on a board kind of cheese. I like to call Humboldt Fog the gateway goat cheese. It has aspects of other popular cheeses. I know we discussed Morbier, and side note, I recently had Maube, which is a Wisconsin cheese, and it has the line. However, it's like one side is goat cheese and one side is sheep cheese. Mixed milk cheeses are so much fun to play with, and that I think is a true fun play on Morbier. So we have that. We also have aspects of like your bries, your camemberts with a bloomy rind and the soft fudgy texture. And of course, we have our typical like goat cheese crumbles. So whether you like Morbier, brie, camembert, goat cheese, this cheese is definitely worth a try for you. And then, of course, once you get there, you'll feel fancy and elevated, and your cheese journey will go on, so on, and so forth. If you're like me, cow's milk tends to be my favorite, but sometimes the goat cheese flavor can be a little too much and a little too overpowering. If that is the case with you, I do recommend maybe letting your cheese ripen a little bit longer so the cream line can get bigger. And then that way, when you eat your piece, it'll be a little bit more of that fudgy, soft ripened cheese instead of a super bright, citrusy goat cheese that everyone else is used to. I will say though, I am based in New Jersey and I used to do some farmers markets out here. And the number one question I would always get is, do you have goat cheese? So it seems like the people out here in New Jersey don't need their minds changed on goat cheese. However, if you do prefer cow's milk, I definitely think you should still give this a try, as it might just change your mind on goat cheese. All right, now for my favorite part, we have our pairings playground. We are going to start with some beverages. First up, we are going to do our wine pairing. And something very easy to remember is that 99% of the time, goat cheese and Sauvignon Blanc just make an ideal combination. Young Breeze, herbal cheeses, those two, which again, all reminiscent of Humboldt Fog. And again, back to another wine rule I love to say, what grows together goes together. We just happen to have a Seek to Find 2023 Sauvignon Blanc from the Central Coast of California. No brainer. That was an easy one. Although I have found that like New Zealand, Sauvignon Blancs are also fantastic as well. And yeah, you can't go wrong with French Sauv Blanc either. So let's give this a go. Oh, I forgot to cut my little piece. Wow. That really cuts the tanginess of the goat cheese. I think because the wine has such a high acidity, mm, it cuts right through that. It's funny, you would think such a high acidic wine, along with such a bright, I don't know, call it almost spicy cheese, would be a little bit more like a big party. But instead, it just kind of balances each other out and kind of mellows each flavor out to just enough where it's like you really want more because you need to see if like this will happen again. It is not the time of day where I should be drinking more wine, but I will definitely be returning to this. If you're more of a beer person, I do recommend an IPA, which I personally am an IPA person. And I did happen to find this really cool Grim Flash Frame beer. It is not like your typical IPA. In fact, it's incredibly light. It looks actually like a lager. It's super light bodied, it's super crisp. Oh, I think we're having the same kind of reaction with this cheese and the beer as we did with this cheese and the Sauv Blanc. Also, shout out to my hometown, go Cougars. That is a fun beer. That is so easy drinking. This is like a great summertime IPA. Wow, that's nice. It's almost like hot water, but with alcohol. That's delish. Definitely getting some earthiness from the beer since it's an IPA, which is bringing out more of that floral, well, not so much floral, but vegetal vibes of this cheese, like the herbaceous landscape of the Central Coast. I also find that the cheese is a little bit saltier, which may be from the Pacific Ocean. And also, all of these sparkling beverages are definitely helping to quench my thirst and at the same time make me want to keep on tasting that. I have to bookmark that beer. Sometimes, you drink an IPA and they're so heavy, they're really hazy, and you can have one. But that is delightful. Okay, for my non-alcoholic beverage pairing, me and my BFF Trader Joe got together and I picked up this sparkling lemon elderflower soda. I did read while doing my research for this cheese that a sparkling lemonade would be really, really good because of the citrus vibes of tangy goat cheese. And that's fine and good, but elderflower tends to be, found in a lot of cocktails, mocktails, and it's a great herbal flavor, which again should really highlight notes of that in this cheese. So let's give that a try. This cheese is messy to just take a bite of. We're doing our best here. That's amazing. I love wine. I love beer. I love cocktails. This might be my favorite pairing out of all of them. That is so refreshing. I would say that's like a little sip of sunshine right there. That is so I know my last episode I talked about like feeling like you're at a picnic in front of the Eiffel Tower, but now I feel like I'm at, sitting on a bench just like facing the Pacific Ocean, watching the waves crash in. I'm definitely sitting on a cliff and I've got this cheese, I've got my lemon elderflower soda. It's, the tart lemon is really cutting through the cheese. I feel like all these beverages are mellowing out the tanginess of the goat cheese, which is really allowing the milky, pudgy cream line to shine through, which again is my favorite part of this cheese. I mean, who doesn't love an ooey gooey cheese? I feel like it's just self care. If I'm not sitting on a cliff drinking lemon elderflower soda with my Humboldt Fog, I do feel like this would be a really good palate cleanser. You know how when you go to like a fancy charity thing or, a fancy restaurant, they offer you like a palate cleanser and it's like the lemon sorbet inside of the lemon. That is what I would treat this as too. So if you're serving this to friends, maybe you put Humboldt Fog by itself in one plate and it's like you bring it out in course. I don't know. I'm just spitballing here. But fun fact, if you want to feel fancy, they sell those sorbets at Costco. All right, let's get our snacking pairings on because this prosciutto is just staring at me with the same desire that I am staring at it with. So I will give you two different pairing combinations. Think of these as like the perfect bite. Our first one, like I said, will be a classic. Here we have some apple. We will do some honey, prosciutto, and I also have some rosemary Marcona almonds. I find that Marcona almonds are kind of like the Ivy League cousin to almonds. They are same, but different and a little bit more elevated, well-traveled. I tease. All right, let's see what we've got here. Let me try to make these pieces a little bit smaller. So I think what I'm gonna do here is do my apple, my honey on my apple. Yeah, got a nice smear of honey on that apple. We're gonna put our cheese. Again, get yourself a piece with all the aspects. And then while I was putting this together, I found that you can actually use your prosciutto, which I kind of cut up, but wrap it around the whole thing, like a little cheese pairing burrito, if you will. And voila, here is our perfect first classic pairing bite. And I also want to wash it down with these little almonds. Oh my gosh, this is so good. The apple is bright and crunchy. The prosciutto almost like leaves its salty flair behind and just assumes this like buttery roll. The honey is giving us a sense of sweetness. The cheese is just playing around with texture. We're getting a slight bit of tang since nothing else really in this combo is nearly as citrusy and tangy. And then finishing off with the crunch of the rosemary Marcona almond. Really just so simple, so simple. And yet I could literally eat like 4 or 5 of those for breakfast. Again, I also think this is a wonderful pairing for some Sauvignon Blanc. It is giving me like a little bit of a French vibe to it when in France. You know, sometimes when I do my pairings playground, I feel a little bit like I'm a cheese magician. And I'm like, well, now for my next trick. But that is really how I feel. I do think these are all fun little tricks. My next one is going to be a more modern twist, and I think this would also make for a great appetizer. If you make 12 of these, we will just call you Martha Stewart from now on. But again, so simple, so easy, but also just the slightest bit elevated. And before we truly get into that, I will say, and I will die on this hill, that baguettes, French baguettes, are the best carbohydrate vessel for any kind of soft cheese. This is my personal opinion. You do not have to agree with me. However, if I see something that is the slightest bit soft ripened, you just have to smear that right on to a piece of baguette. And it is like the crunch and crustiness of the bread really just contrasts with the smooth cheese. I have eaten aged cheese with baguettes as well, but I find it better to like eat the cheese than the bread. But if you want to have one of those like at the Cheesemonger Invitational, they call it the perfect bite. And I think that baguette is like the perfect little vessel. So in our modern twist, we are going to go a little bit funky. So we have our cheese, of course. So we'll start. I would like that piece, but I'm not sure if anyone else people would appreciate that much cheese on it. We'll give that a smear. And like I said, the gooey cream line really helps to kind of keep the crumbly goat cheese all together. Has been sitting for a bit, so we are getting this like almost cream cheese, whipped cream cheese type of look to it. And with that, we are gonna play on the citrus notes of the cheese. So here we have some apricot jam. And we're just gonna give that a glide right on top. And with that, I brought over last minute some pistachios to give it just a little bit of crunch. You can probably make this a little bit prettier than I did, but that is okay. I am here for flavor, not so much for aesthetics. The cheese itself is so beautiful that I don't really need to take away from it. This is really giving me like California brunch energy. Like when I eat this, I would totally eat this also in California. I feel like it would start there and spread its way out, kind of like the avocado toast boom of the 2010s. It's so easy. It's so easy. And you know what? The goat cheese is really not overpowering here because the citrus of the apricot jam is like the first thing I really taste. And what's most important about this piece is that the cheese is giving the texture, not so much the flavor of this bite. And it's really just kind of wrapping everything together. The pistachio is crunchy and salty. The bread is just as a baguette should be, delightful, plain, crunchy, crusty, just I feel like the goat cheese has like fallen into the little divots of the bread and it's like every bite you're getting is like cream line inside, apricot. It's really, like I said, put 12 of these on a plate. Happy holidays. It's impressive to me that the flavor balance of that bite is so smooth when you have such overachieving players, apricot jam, pistachio, Humboldt Fog, and yet it really just all pulls together nicely. I'm wondering if maybe we warm them up in the oven before putting on the jam and pistachio, or you can probably just crush your pistachios a bit, sprinkle them on the top when they come out of the oven if you're warming it up. That sounds divine to me for a holiday. I feel like you can't go wrong with Humboldt Fog and pairings, whether it's like a fig cracker, which is probably divine with that, or any kind of goat cheese and honey. Another great rule of thumb with pairing goat cheese is that look up goat cheese flavors. A lot of times different companies, but I will say Vermont Creamery, and see what kind of flavors they have. And chances are that actual item will be divine with goat cheese. I know honey's a big one. I've also seen strawberry goat cheese. I've seen maple pecan goat cheese. And these are all things that I'm like, I can drizzle this on any kind of goat cheese. Even a goat Gouda would probably be delightful with a little maple syrup. Are you kidding me? Actually, I actually may go try that with Humboldt Fog once I turn the camera off. Personally, I feel like Humboldt Fog is such a mood. Like it is just its own mood, it's its own vibe. I see it pretty often on cheese boards when I go to parties, and people always tend to just like leave the rind. There's like a U shape because everyone's so busy digging out the middle. Don't be shy. You should definitely taste the rind. It's given that the cheese is so flavorful, the rind is really right on board with that. And when it comes to pairing, like I said, carb, cheese, jam, you cannot go wrong with that simple formula with Humboldt Fog as well. As I mentioned before, this cheese is self-care. It makes for the best girl dinner. I would just take a piece out, let it sit for 30-ish minutes, and whatever you can find. Pretzels, like pretzel thins, Ritz crackers, they're so buttery. That's probably so good. Oh man. Okay. We've got a lot of ideas to try with Humboldt Fog, and I would love to hear from you as to what your favorite way to eat or serve Humboldt Fog is as well. So if you can drop that in the comments, maybe I will do like a follow up and just try what everyone's telling me to try. If you like my cheese content and you want to know more, please hit the subscribe button. My goal is to do one cheese per week that we all have heard of but may not know too much about. And the next time you are at the supermarket or your favorite cheese shop and you see our iconic ashy girlfriend, Humboldt Fog, definitely treat yourself to a wedge. You want to look for something that is a little bit softer under the rind. I think we're at like ultimate squeezability right now. Oh, it's a little pudgy, especially on that right hand side. And you want something where you can still see the difference in the core itself. So you can, cream line, crumbly core on a baguette. It's really all you need. And yeah, pour yourself a glass of something bubbly, whether it's a light IPA, sparkling lemonade, sparkling demi-sec blind, a little champagne would probably be good with this too. And just treat yourself. Let this foggy, floral American dream of a cheese do the rest. That is all for today. Stay cultured, stay cheesy, and I'll see you next week.